from the point of view of the thing that can see everything that's ever happened in this universe, it finds that it is good. It finds that it is beautiful. And so it may not be beautiful from our one little camera angle. Oh, one little camera angle just had 3 kids and they died in a fire and they freaking died of cancer. And it's like, my faith is not that it's going to work out for me. My faith is that it's beautiful and that I am part of a beautiful work of art. From, if not my perspective, then from the perspective that can see it out of every camera angle at once. And let's assume that that thing is in the future. We're all uploading ourselves. All of our memories are going into the cloud, and it can see them all. And from light's point of view, right? If you're a lighticle, and you were created in, let's say there was a big bang, and you're going to, let's say there's a black hole at the end of time. From the point of view of light, it got there in not even one Planck length of space and time. Light got there instantly, and it took every path to get there. So from the point of view of the mind I'm talking about, bam, it all happened. And it's fucking beautiful. It goddamn better well be. I have to believe that it is. I choose to believe that it is because that's the thing that gets me up in the morning and being like, yeah, let's keep playing for this thing.
Greetings, future fossils. This is Michael Garfield welcoming you to another episode of the podcast that explores our place in time. It's a big day today. This is episode 100, which is why I saved this special conversation for this week. A chat with a guest so awesome and important that we had to have it twice because the whole 2+ hour conversation that we recorded back on April Fool's Day, she wanted to keep it patrons only and out of the public feed because we just dove in and started rapping at each other like we didn't have an audience and we're going a million miles an hour and it's kind of hard to understand. So our dear friend Heather flew her back to Austin so that we could record a second conversation, and then we did the whole same thing over again, and I acted like a puppy in a dog park and talked way too much in this episode, so please forgive me, because the Teafaerie is a magical and rare and wonderful creature, the only regular columnist for Erowid.org, the acclaimed drug information site, if you're familiar with them. I think if you could regard psychonautics as a genre, then the Teafaerie would be the rock star of that genre, like the Led Zeppelin. Or maybe a better analogy would be that among fantasy films, she's the never-ending story. Or maybe with science fiction, she's Frank Herbert's Dune. And we're talking about somebody who is keeping the enthusiasm and raw weirdness of the 1990s Mondo 2000 cyberpunk transhumanist future forward, let's do this kind of attitude in full-throated splendor. Somebody who really helps balance my cynicism, as you will hear in this episode. But someone who I think has some really powerful and important cautionary perspectives for a very ungrounded psychedelics / technology double scene here. I think as technology becomes more psychedelic and psychedelics become more and more a technology, that we will find the Teafaerie's hard-won wisdoms to be increasingly relevant to our daily lives in general. So please forgive me for talking too much in this episode. I am just so excited to see her and to get to share one of her extremely rare podcast appearances with you. But before we dive into an episode that is basically just two people interrupting each other with science fiction references incessantly for an hour and a half, I wanted to let everybody know about the new Future Fossils book club that I am starting on Patreon. We've been talking about it a little bit in the Facebook discussion group, but starting this month, December, we're going to be reading a new book every month and then hosting a video call where we'll take a few hours at our leisure and go over the ideas of these works in great luxurious detail. And the first one that I am extremely excited to be doing with everybody is Peter Watts's book Blind Sight. This was a Hugo Award finalist. It was recommended to me by last episode's guest Eric Davis, whose taste in science fiction is professional aficionado level. And I just finished Blind Sight, and I'm extremely excited to be discussing this with the Future Fossils patrons because it has everything. Like, it's just literally a smorgasbord of all of the cool ideas that we have discussed on this show in very, very skillful fictional delivery. And it is dark, and it is wonderful. And I have so much to say about this book and so many questions to throw into the discussion. So the book club conversation for Peter Watts's Blind Sight will be sometime in early January, and it will be available to everybody who signs up as a Patreon supporter at any level, patreon.com/Michael Garfield. I also have a ton of psychedelic coloring book pages and special patrons-only episodes coming out this month for you fine people who have been helping me keep this show going without having to make any kind of creative compromises for sponsors. Special note to the three most recent patrons, Christian Holmes, Morton Tundle, and Mark Beneteau. I hope I am pronouncing y'all's names correctly. I am so glad that this podcast can continue to be as weird as it has to be in order to communicate a little of the flavor of our exceedingly weird future. So, anyway, if a monthly visionary sci-fi reading group sounds like fun to you, then I hope you will join us. I am extremely pumped to see where this development leads us as a community because the Facebook group has been wonderful. And there are so many brilliant, amazing people in the listening audience of this show, and I would love to do whatever I can to get you into deeper conversation with one another. That's the real motivation here. So, anyway, okay, thank you all so much for sticking it with me through 100 episodes, and give it up for the Teafaerie. All right, we're doing this.
Yay!
It's happening.
Again. How many times does this happen? Did I say that out loud?
Twice to my knowledge.
Are you fucking with me? How many times does this happen?
Thanks to Heather for flying you out here, wherever she is right now. We're really glad, all of us, listening to this episode from the future.
Hi, future people.
That we
I hope it's awesome.
To rope you into this show not once but twice, and I'm looking forward to this being a very novel and complete conversation with you. So, the Teafaerie, thanks for being on Future Fossils.
Why, thank you. If you like it so much that you, for whatever reason, wanted to hear more of the fairy rambling with Michael Garfield, in fact, there's like a couple hours of it behind his Patreon wall there. I'm talking too fast, but you could slow it down in theory. Like,
it'd be the only podcast that you would slow down instead of speeding up. That was then and this is now. I couldn't even heat water for tea before you and I got into it about, life after the singularity and all of that biz.
Like we do.
And yes, the fidelity of mind uploads. There was a piece that we picked up on the secret first recording about my concern that humankind is about to split into the Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, billionaire, immortal, head in a jar types, robot Nixon's back, versus the plebes, everybody else that's in Elysium, Matt Damon just scraping away, and he's probably got cyborg enhancements because he needs them to work in the Amazon warehouse, but it's not like a tremendously empowering thing. It's actually violating and horrible. So you had a different angle on this, and I would like for us to start there. So you're not afraid of rich people getting the future first?
Oh, I think it's great that rich people are going to get it first, because eggs are going to, I mean, loving you rich people, and thank you, and I'm a huge fan of Elon Musk, but eggs are going to be broken. Beginners' mistakes are going to be made. Rich people are welcome to get it first. By the time it gets democratized, it's going to be functional. How long does that take? I mean, we have more computer on our phones than not the shuttle had, than mission control had in the Apollo mission, say, by a lot. The phone they're giving away at the bank has more computer on it. How long did that take for it to get democratized? In one generation of having babies, say, we will have the technology that works for, essentially everybody, unless they want to hold it behind their backs for some reason.
So when it comes to the issue of immortality, you kind of feel like people are, like the first immortals are going to be bad copies? that it's going to be...
Well, yeah.
That we won't...
They may be able to continue to upgrade themselves, but the first generation uploads, say, let's just go with the idea that uploads are going to be possible, right? We don't know that yet. But if it turns out to be computable, they're going to end up in a virtual reality, say, that's not really been built out yet. And they're going to be low fidelity copies in a way, because our limbic system, for instance, is a large part of our consciousness. So let's just say that you somehow were able to record your brain with fidelity. You still don't feel like you do if you're embodied. You're not angry or fearful or horny, and that may be an upgrade, but it's going to be way different.
You don't think we're gonna start by copying the whole person?
No, I think it's going to be easier first to copy your brain than just your whole nervous system, including your glandular effects.
Did you see RoboCop 2?
No,
There's a whole scene in this where they show... You see this video of like all of the subsequent attempts to make another RoboCop. Like, it wasn't just a flash in the pan, right? Like, they're hoping to reproduce this. Mm-hmm. And so you see them experimenting on prisoners.
Sure.
And like the robo prisoners all go insane and gun down everybody in the laboratory. It's one of those. Obviously, this is not...
there's been a long and ignominious tradition of experimenting on, those who we have control over.
Yeah, but I guess I bring that up because one of the things I actually like about the RoboCop movies is they get into the mind fuck of waking up without your human body and being like, oh, okay, I have like superpowers now, but I'm powerfully incomplete, and thus also subject to the coders. There's something about opening ourselves up, and it's not just RoboCop. John C. Wright's writing, The Golden Age, he gets into this in that series.
Well, you don't have to upload yourself for that. Let's say that we have, I am a big fan of Neuralink. Like I said, go Elon Musk. We're going to need to have, more output potential than we currently have if we want to, interface with the AI. But that suggests, if anything in your brain that has both inflow and outflow, in theory, could be hacked.
Yeah,
so you're not being uploaded. You're not being uploaded even, but now you've got a chip in your brain, and in theory, you're going to be subject to that. It's training wheels, but it's low nearly upon us.
I mean, do you think that I'm just cynical as a...
Yes, no, as not compared to people. But...
As a millennial, right? Like, do you think that I'm just being cynical about, having grown up in an age when all of the rhetorical promise of the internet turned out to be a way to convince us to participate in a real-time experiment about the world's most successful behavioral control and social engineering mechanism ever? There's no question that people were complicit in this. Anyway.
I think you're totally wrong. I think that, yes, not totally wrong. I think that the warnings are important, right? I think that it's necessary to have sort of like the 1984 what's the Huxley one, Brave New World, right? Everybody knows Brave New World. People don't mostly know Island. Like, what happens if you try to psychedelically regulate society and it turns out...
Well, but Island was about a utopia that was destroyed from the outside by the military.
Sure, and again, there's a warning, but not a warning about don't even try it, right?
Yeah.
And so the warnings are important. And if you're joining this band, and all right, there's drums playing, and there's flutes playing, and there's guitars playing, what's missing here? There's 90% warnings and 10% of people saying, go, this could be awesome. The warnings are being done, the warnings are important. There needs to be voices that are saying, well, yeah, but it could be awesome, right? If there was 90% of people saying this could be awesome, then I'd say bring up the volume on the warnings.
Okay, so let's talk about what does it look like to have a future where we are connected to each other and to the machines through these extremely intimate interfaces with the most sensitive internal parts of our own bodies. And we're in the machine and the machine is in us, and it allows us to be inside one another. Like, I don't know if you, I know that you stopped reading fiction until you finished your book.
I can read fiction that I already know and love. I can't read new fiction.
Okay. Have you been watching Black Mirror?
Yes. And it's the only show, Westworld and Black Mirror are the only shows I've watched since Firefly. I've watched, that was 2005?
Yeah.
I've watched a few episodes of Doctor Who, and I've watched a few episodes of Rick and Morty.
Okay.
I have to see it at your house if you say, like, come over and see this. It's so important. I don't watch TV, but yes, I have seen Black Mirror, all of them.
I'll sit you down and binge all of Rick and Morty at some point. So all three of those, actually, Rick and Morty, Black Mirror, and Westworld, all talk about the end of the age of advertisements.
That's why I watched them, because people are like, this is important about what you talk about.
Yeah, being just this thing about, you don't need an advertisement anymore if you can get somebody to just want what you want them to want.
People have been trying that from the beginning with different strategies.
Right. So the question is, what does the world look like in which people have this, front door to your desire, and they can just like walk into it, and it's not or maybe, I guess they can't, is the deal, right? It's an immune system evolution issue.
Well, let's go back. You were talking about, the machine that's rubbing its hands together to get us this technology in the first place. Me and you both know people who helped develop the internet. And from a large extent, they were not, in fact, people who had our subjugation in mind. I did a speech like the week before 2012 at a True Believers conference in Boston. And I said, just imagine your worst nightmare, right? The lizard people are having a meeting in their secret chalet
I want to go.
lair in darkest Switzerland, and the Rothschilds are there, and Dick Cheney's there, and they're shitting their pants, these people. They didn't mean for us to get the internet. They sold us this shit. They thought it was going to be like a combination TV and video game console. But it's not in 2012, right? And it's certainly not now. The Facebook, what social media is doing is it's amplifying cognitive bias.
Yeah.
Right? It's a cognitive bias amplifier. And we are very quickly, thank God, because we're first generation of having the internet, making the beginner's mistakes and saying, oh shit, that's what happens when you have a cognitive bias amplifier. But it was never the machine rubbing its hands to get that. It's frickin' Facebook just wanting to make more advertising dollars, and this is the emergent effect. Now they figured out how to use it. I'm not saying that Cambridge Analytica isn't using it, but they didn't create it. They just figured out how to use it. Facebook's getting that way because that's just the algorithm that makes them more money.
This is interesting because actually, here we are talking about what happens.
Could use it.
I feel like I just became aware of a critical blind spot in my own thinking on this, because here we are talking about, oh no, like, what about the first people to upload? When really we are the first people to upload.
It's just outside of our body, like, mostly.
I was in.
Now we got a Fitbit that's almost inside our body.
Right. I was on Instant Messenger in high school. So like I'm aware of this stuff, but it shows up around puberty for me. It's like adulthood for you. And so we would expect that people alive today have a completely distorted view of the potentials of these technologies, because we're suffering disproportionately due to their appearance right now.
Right.
Like somebody was publishing recently on how when you look at the beginning of agriculture, or at least what we consider agriculture, not wildcrafting, not like with the Aboriginals
but we're going to actually,
but like the, Western agriculture, Fertile Crescent shit, that for hundreds of years after that emerges in the archaeological record, people are not having a good time. Like the animals and the human beings the bones are like clearly suffering from malnutrition.
Now you're working 12 hours a day.
Yeah, it's horrible compared to what came before it. And then eventually but there was still...
We can support more people.
There's still like a thermodynamic necessity for it to happen. Like it was still this thing where it seemed like it made sense. And I'm feeling that right now in my life, applying for the job of my dreams only to get it at the same time that I'm like learning I'm going to be a dad, so, and then suddenly realizing what that means and like having to cross country and like, leave the Eden of Austin, Texas and like go wander into the deserts of New Mexico with, this like very nativity scene, 98% occupancy type situation. Right. And I'm sitting here thinking,
oh, I see what you mean. There's no room at the end.
Yeah, I was like, oh, well, this is all very inevitable and necessary and destined and true. And yet at the same time, it's hard, and it's like this kid's not even here yet. And the whole situation is just like the necessity of
it. That you're having a baby changed your perceptions about the future?
Only insofar as I feel that I have, in various visionary experiences over the years, felt that I had communications with an entity that I would have, and I've talked about this on the show, actually. I talked about this with Michelangelo in episode 27. I had experiences where I felt like my future child was communicating with me.
I know we've talked about it 5 years ago,
and
maybe.
Like, sort of drawing me into the strange attractor of its timeline, the timeline where this child exists, and being like, come on, you want this. And that's exactly what I'm talking about in terms of the unwritten chapter of my book about how the future is cute and playful.
Yeah,
and how
that's what I'm saying.
Playfulness manipulates us, and like it's not necessarily malicious.
No.
But it is manipulative.
Types, right?
Yeah, like it is. There is this thing about the cat and how the cat becomes cute. The roles have switched, and like this thing that we used to develop a religious obsession with as we watched it tear apart our brothers and sisters and parents or whatever is now the house pet. And so we still have this thing about like this magical fascination with cats,
right.
Because they're the predator. But
who's subjugated who, man? Those guys own us.
Yeah, but they in some way they still are, in charge, and there's that whole thing, So, and then the same, I'm sure, is, that's the same emerges in the evolutionary psych arguments about parent-child dynamics, and sleep-deprived parents talk about how they understand how animals could eat their children. And I'm not there yet, but
cynicism is what I'm saying. Like, does it make you more inclined to be like, okay, I've got to find a way to believe the future's going to be okay, or does it make you more inclined to be anxious because I can't necessarily protect this thing?
Well, I mean, for what it's worth, I do think that optimism. I keep running into this over and over again. People. Like Mark Nelson, when Mark Nelson, the CEO of the Institute of Ecotechnics, was one of the 8 people that lived inside Biosphere 2 when it was a closed
Is that
system.
one of the Mars?
It was the one in,
basically.
It was billed as a test colony.
Right.
But it was really so much more than that. But at any rate, he's like, optimism is actually a yoga, and despair is basically like a form of sloth. That despair is it's like heart failure or one of these other symptoms where you're not, it's because you're not exercising the organ of your optimism that, your body just decides that you're done and it's time to give up.
What I say is I'm just a coward. I tried despair and I can't do it. Like, I can't take that shit. In order to go forward and not want to kill myself, like, I have to believe that it's going to get more awesome. I need to find some way to justify that proposition. Like, I can't sit and I guess we're just screwed then. I tried.
Yeah, by the fruits shall you know them, right? I don't know that despair in people seems to lend itself, despair as an aesthetic decision, or despair as like a philosophical disposition.
Let's sit around cafes in Paris and...
Right. I'm going to be, I'm going to decide that everything is fucked.
But if you have a kid, you kind of can't.
The philosophers that I have been trying to communicate with that occupy those spaces, the ones that I find so dark that it's a guilty pleasure.
Right.
You know, it turns out
it's like bad porn. You're like,
yeah.
oh yeah, I don't even know why I like
they're
this.
not
but
happy
like,
people. They're
no.
not friendly people. You know,
Right.
they're sad and strange. And you know, I don't know that. Well, I think I've said many times on the show that as a depressive person myself, that I will always defend that the social superorganism has a role for depressive loner weirdos. And that,
absolutely.
You know, the perimeter is an important.
It has a role for, I'm going to go out and fight mammoths, and I'm not too concerned about my personal survival. Like, all of those types need to be here, or we wouldn't have made it.
Right.
20% of a tribe needs to have the shamanic genotype, or whatever. So if you and your apprentice
20% is pretty high.
No, I know, but, well, okay.
Like, if we had if 1 out of 5 people... Oh, fuck. Maybe 1 out of 5 people
No,
I know
it wasn't 20%. It was like 1 in
shamans.
20. It was like 1 in 25.
Okay.
So if you have Dunbar's number, right, if you have a group of, say, 150 before a tribe splits into 2 tribes, you know, if the shaman and their apprentice both get wiped out, you know, somebody else can come up and do the thing. You know, maybe like 1 in 25 need to have the basic predisposition, but there has to be people who have the basic disposition to be bruisers, or like loners, or somebody who comes up with new ideas.
With a group of 150 people, and like 6 people are team shamanic agenda.
Right, sure,
you know,
right.
like
Shamanic
they're the
agenda.
ones. They're the 6 of your friends that you can trust to just be like, look, I don't know, but you do. So anything that you put in me is good. I'm fine with that. I trust you completely. The other 145 of you, back the fuck off.
Yeah.
Actually, I love you. We're family.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're getting off topic
All right,
here.
all right, go back.
No, this is great.
How is it going to be, you say? How's it going to be when we make it to the future?
It's nice to see you more than once a year.
I know. All right, how's it going to be when we make it to the future? I assume that we are already in a simulation. So, I mean, like, if you like your metaphors plausible, right? It's plausible. That we're already in a simulation. Because, you know, the numbers game. How many, if a simulation is possible at all, how many of them must there be? Yeah. More than there would be real universes. If, say, one in every galaxy had one simulation, we can see 300 billion galaxies from here. So that's one real universe with 300 billion simulations in it. That's lowballing it. What are the odds, right? So if it's possible at all, this has almost certainly got to be one. In which case, the question of can you have humor and irony and caritas and drama inside of a simulation has been answered for us.
Well, I think it sort of...
Obviously we can. We can have everything we have in here because this is already inside one.
But then I think that there's a question that people aren't asking about the whole simulation argument, which I find really interesting, that neither the people in support or critical of it are asking, what is a simulation?
Well, this is reality in the sense that reality is a word we made up in here to mean this.
Right.
And it's that.
Well, because I'm reading, my buddy Alex Feldman, shout out to Alex, he got me to read, and I'm in the middle of reading Tad Williams' Otherland, which from the 90s, it's this massive, it's like even the first book is like over 800 pages, or it's ridiculous, but it's 1996 looking at the middle of the 21st century and how far we've come with virtual reality and how things go... they cross the digital divide, and things that happen in the virtual space have actual consequences and all this stuff. And he was musing on the fact that we have the same brain that we had in many respects. We have the same brain that we had a million years ago.
Right, so the cherry on top is recently
that brain
developed.
Was never, ever, ever preoccupied with whether or not something was real. The human brain is utter shit at determining the difference between real and unreal, and the fact that we even have these categories is itself kind of strange. So,
I don't know if that's true though. Like, if they dreamed already a million years ago. In many cases, they were taking some kind of psychedelic, whether it was mushrooms in Africa or if it was, ayahuasca or something we've not yet rediscovered. So, if they were dreaming, if they were taking psychedelics, it's always... it's better for a mammal to have a quick guess than a good guess. So we heard a rustling up there, and we looked up and saw a snake. Oh no, is that a snake? You act like it's real first. And then, oh, it turned out not to be. Okay.
Well, no, but it's not that is it real or not. It's you assume a subject, and we know that that's a cognitive bias, like the assumption, like the anthropomorphization of things, the personalization of an impersonal environment. But of course, the modern world's erred the other way, right? We've erred on depersonalizing and everything and unminding minded things. But it's more like it's not what is the snake real? It's not is it a replicant? This like Blade Runner issue of
okay, I see what you're saying, but what again, quote
what
unquote,
is a simulation?
what is real? So you say, oh, there's no such thing as a false experience. That was actually an experience.
Right, yeah.
So was that a real experience? Yes, it was a real experience. Does it correlate to some assumed objective reality that we're sharing out there? In some cases, we need to know the answer. If you lived in a virtual reality most of the time, say you died here and, had been 1,000 years of their time uploaded, you're no longer needing to know the answer of is this happening in a presumed original 3 space. That's not even a question to you.
But except that like maybe it matters if there's like a supernova and the gamma explosion from the supernova wipes out the servers that you're stored on. Like I still feel like
sure.
that there is a sense
and
in
that
which...
could happen to this entire simulation any freaking time, and we would never know it hit us. Okay.
Well, I mean, but that's the thing, right? Is that I guess what I'm saying is like.
There's nothing we can do about that. Just like if it was
is real even.
There's nothing we could do about a supernova way over there yet. We're not. Oh God, I love Greg Egan.
Yeah.
But there's
Diaspora. That book.
Yeah, I love Diaspora. But there's no if it's coming for us right now. There's nothing we can do. Just like if we were in a computer somewhere.
Well, I mean, if it's like a flesh melter, there's nothing we can do. But if it's just a power surge,
get underground
issue,
for a few days.
Then, yeah, I mean, it would be nice. Let's
hope that whoever is out there operating the thing will protect whatever we're running on if something like that happens.
Right.
But most of the time, that's not it won't matter to us. Is that real? That's just an irrelevant question.
Okay, so I want to move from the real, unreal question, like is that even a valid thing, to this other consideration, which is more a matter of the heart, which I have been sitting with lately, and you just brought up. Yeah. You just brought it up, which is I am constantly zooming out to realize how dependent my existence is on, let's call it the plumbing. The plumbing and the plumbers, right? Or like mom and dad. Whichever way you want to talk about it. It's however independent you think you are, there are all of these other beings whose labor supports your existence. Like the microbiome, all of the stuff that's like digesting your food for you.
Right.
Oh, we suddenly discover this, in the last couple decades.
To say nothing of the farmers themselves, too.
Of course, there's also the farmers. Of course, there's also the beasts of burden that they employ or,
Right. We all depend on the rest of the web work, most of it.
Right. But it's like, to think of it as the web work is this kind of, it's 3P. It's like very objective and kind of clinical. And there's something about like realizing that there's a stigmergy.
That's a good word.
Yeah, like you talked about the emergent factors earlier. That there's something about like it's a web work that we're all working toward it, and we're all sort of contributing to it. It's the co-occurrence, or what is it in Buddhism? They talk about the co-arising.
Yes, conditioned arising or
yes,
rising
conditioned
together.
arising of phenomena, and there's a subject in that. Or rather, there are like countless subjects, and that it's like.
Do you mean from whose point of view, or?
I guess what I'm suggesting is that there's a moral alignment to the aesthetic of appreciating that we are like. Maybe it's
our moral duty to get our freaking weight off of that system.
Yeah, it's adaptive to be grateful, I guess is what I'm saying.
Gratitude would be to get our freaking weight off of that system. And whenever it is possible, either move to L5s or to move into the virtual so that we're not freaking pulling resources from, sure, we still are. We're using some solar energy or whatever that we're being stored on, but we're not. If we mean to live forever or for a long time, or if we mean to double our population again, or whatever, we need to stop stressing the system, the placenta, of this thing, and as soon as possible offload our consciousness to something that is not necessarily sucking the resources of all those other organisms, or it is doing so less.
But I mean, is that a healthy way to look at it? Like that
versus what?
Versus
let's stay
like,
here and keep sucking on the nipple of Gaia, like.
Well, no, I mean, no, just that whole idea that this is first of all, that this is a placenta, which suggests a kind of like Gnostic,
but metaphorically,
birthing process in which we crack the egg and then.
I believe is a big word, but that's how I look at it.
Consciousness behind.
Sure.
It's very much in keeping with that sort of hermetic evolution of like you.
Which you have an alternative perspective, or like.
Well, I just think that, I mean, taken as a value unto itself, that is, I think, the spiritual expression of a like toxic masculinity in a sense. And this is a strange thing to say.
Super feminine, like don't like it's. Let's move into this, the mysterious mama matrix or whatever, versus like let's just keep using resources here, like what. Toxic masculinity in what way?
Well, I just mean like the escape fetish, okay, so like Rudolf Steiner talks about Lucifer and Ahriman, right? Like his devil is.
Well, Lucifer's the hero. Like this is the light bringer. This is the.
Well, that's just it, right? Is that you've got, on the one hand, you've got this force of evolutionary emergence,
right,
and it's moving from the many to the one. It's moving into that Teilhard de Chardin omega point. And it's concerned about wrapping everything back up into, its embrace and uniting everything. And it is, in some sense, the religious impulse, right? It is weaving it all back together. And yet, at the same time, it is also very, like, if you look at, like, Satanists, like the Church of Satan is very, in a way, very morally upright, very concerned with the integrity of the agent and the author of the life, and
you yourself, or the theoretical creator.
Well, just consent and agency and choice and moral self-determination.
But a baby never has to be brought into this world, in a certain, or maybe your baby did, but like most people don't feel like they did. Like, where's the consent start? But
then Ahriman, that's a great point, right? But you're like, we're creating a conversation pretzel here. So,
okay.
Then in Steiner's view of things, Ahriman, the opposite force, is from the one to the many. It's the decay and the breakdown of things. It's the mechanization of society. It's the reduction of the human being to data. It's all of that shit. And these two things obviously co-occur and co-create one another. And form some sort of roiling double toroid of historical momentum.
I see what you're saying, when things occur in the presence of their opposite or whatever.
Right,
that
so
condition.
yeah, exactly. The enantiodromia of the situation.
It's a good word too.
Yeah, that it actually doesn't shock me at all to learn that the kind of escape, future forward situation that you're talking about here, escaping into the matrix, I frequently see expressed as some sort of like adolescent techno-bonerist fantasy in the singularity crowd, that it's like it's the same, and that these things create their opposites in each other and then they exist in each other.
Right, the yin-yang symbol, the important part is the little circle. I mean, it's all an important part, but it's the line between them. It's the fact that, the opposite always has to be intrinsically part of the center of the other side of the thing. And I think that, this is partly why I think that this universe is art in the first place. Like, from my perspective, I genuinely believe that this is art. And partly because it works any way you hold it. So you hold it this way, it's a epic adventure story, and you hold it this way and it's a romantic comedy, and you hold it this way and it's a tragic farce. And the fact that it works no matter how you hold it is part of why you're like, wow, this is amazing art. You think, how far can it continue down this line and still be like that? And it's like, so far, it just keeps getting more like that. If you're in the mode to look at this whole thing as, hopelessly fucked, that's there for you. If you're in a mode to look at this thing as the most epic possible, like, birth story and origin of a god, you know. I mean, this is how baby gods grow up, right? If you say your children are God, but like most people act like we're pets of God or toys of God. The child of a sheep grows up to be a sheep, right? The child of a human being grows up to be a human being. So in theory, what does a child of God grow up to be? We are about to become creators of worlds. May we be wise and loving gods. But I feel very confident that this is how a baby god grows up. We are about to start creating worlds.
Okay, so this is perfect, because I was just talking about this with Weird Studies, which I don't know if you listen to that podcast.
I just like the name of it.
Phil Ford and J.F. Martel are wonderful guys, and
salute.
Yeah, they've done episodes on Phil Dick. They did
I love
Eric
Phil
Davis
Dick.
Was their first guest on the show.
God, I love it. Eric Davis and me go way back. Like, we're actually buddies. We used to have a psychedelics club in the 90s.
I need to be asking you for stories too, probably.
Oh no, we had the Last Saturdays Club, where it was like the last Saturday of every month for me and Eric Davis and Mark Pesci, and like in the 90s. We go way back. Salute to those guys.
So they were talking about this whole the issue of turning into gods, right? Mm-hmm. Is that when Jafar gets his wish and becomes the genie, then he's stuck in the lamp. And
I only know the Disney version of that.
Exactly, right? But that's the way that they trick him into attaining his
genie wishes are always tricky.
Fast cosmic power, itty bitty tiny living space, right?
Yeah.
And so
again, who cares, right? If you're in the bottle, but if inside of it, from your perspective, you can make a whole nother universe. Maybe we may be in a bottle, in fact. But that's not your point.
Well, no, but that is the point. That is the point, because the question is, like, if you can do anything, it's like Minecraft, right? We're testing this right now. If you can do anything, but I mean, I guess that's what determines whether it's a simulation or not. Is like how much control do you think you have?
Well, I mean, my subjective experience of manifestation is deeply striking. It's the kind of thing that makes you that it would incline someone less skeptical to believe that they must be the protagonist of the situation.
Okay, this is a great place to dogleg into something that we did not even remotely touch on the secret private recording. El Uno.
It's there for you as Patreon.
Yeah. By the way, as soon as you upload yourself, there won't be ads.
No! Well, that was just this is important.
You'll just want to hear it.
What you're saying is super, super important, which is that if we upload ourselves into Facebook's universe, there damn well be ads. There'll be logo in our freaking minds. This is why it's so important for the programming.
Logo, by the way, is not a neologism. That's actually from Neil Stephenson.
Yeah. You're walking down the street and you just see logos like appear in your brain because it's just flashing into your... Right? If the universe that we're uploading ourselves to is freaking Facebook's universe, just because they got there first and it was free, you know, instead of paying $5 a month to go to the awesome universe, everybody's going to the universe that's free because you're the freaking product, and then there will be ads. But if we... Well,
not everybody has the money to pay for a quality...
The thing is if enough people are signed on to the thing, it should be free. If everybody paid... This is Jaron Lanier's point, which is like, if everybody pays $5 to be on the social network, it can run without ads. And then it is not a cognitive bias enhancer, right? It wouldn't cost that freaking much for them to still be making money, not billions, but enough to keep their company running and have nice condos, right? And
so 3 billion people on Facebook. If everybody on Facebook gave them $5,
it's plenty to keep their freaking servers running.
A once in a lifetime fee, you know.
Let's just say that it costs, as much as Netflix or something. Still, it would be plenty to keep their servers running and to keep the people who are running it in nice condos with hot tubs. And we wouldn't have to be subject to that kind of manipulation. Like I said, it's not the machine rubbing its hands together. It's the algorithm that's just Facebook naturally putting the things that gets clicked on the most, right?
Kim Stanley Robinson said this in a panel that was, I guess, sponsored or at least promoted by Long Now Foundation earlier this week.
I love
It was
them.
him and
I
Annalee
love the
Newitz and Hanu Rajanimi, I was like 3 of my favorite sci-fi authors, and it was awesome. And I posted
I like Spider Robinson, but Kim Stanley Robinson, that's Green Mars, Red Mars.
Yeah, he did the Mars trilogy. And Kim Stanley Robinson was saying in there that profit is the problem. Like the idea of profit is the problem, and that it's an algorithm that's just your profit is somebody else's labor, which is like the dark flip side of the whole like gratitude co-arising thing that we were just discussing. But
Pop. You know the GEB, like Pop and Fish. Okay, 2 conversations back.
Yeah.
Pop. What were you saying?
yeah, but let's pop back to what we didn't talk about at all in the last one was this issue of manifestation and the sort of ontology of the universe disclosed by these experiences, right? These because we've talked about synchronicity on the show before, for sure, many times.
Look, yes, cognitive bias, okay? Yes, there's going to be, what's the thing where you see what you expect to see? If you're ready of ecstasies to see what you expect to see. Confirmation bias.
Right.
Right? That said, wow, you know when an event is on and you can feel it and everything snaps together like magnets and you're looking for your friend and they run right into you and there's a thing that happens. People know when I was so in the flow, right? And if we could figure out what that thing is and amplify it, it would be a bigger deal than figuring out that those lights are other suns from our perspective, as far as an obvious thing that's been staring us in the face, right? I'm not saying that I understand how it works. I can see that why it would seem like it does from my perspective, right? And I wouldn't be willing to bet my children's health, say, that there's anything to the idea that, your thoughts reflect in the apparently exterior world. But I would bet all the money I'm about to make in the next 10 years, right?
So,
how much do you believe it? I'd bet $100, but not $1,000, right? I'd bet all the money I'm going to make in the next 10 years. I wouldn't bet my children's health on it.
Do you know Adam Curry he was of the Global Consciousness Project. He was like one of the last students at the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab, I think. And then he went on. They were doing this. Global Consciousness Project did that grid of random number generators all over the planet, and then
and then certain
measuring
events
disturbances in the force. Basically, it's a very bizarre.
It seems like they found some. I know. I think Europa did it too. Like the Heart Institute did it.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about
ones.
heart math.
Yeah, heart math.
So. They're looking at like field coherence and sudden emergent integrity and
so what experiments could be done is the question to demonstrate. Prove is a big word, but to demonstrate.
Adam Curry did this thing where I interviewed him years ago about this for Reality Sandwich before this podcast even existed, and I don't know what happened to this app. Adam, if you're listening to this.
Let him know.
But it was the consciousness app, and it uses a random number generator in your phone.
How random? It's not got a freaking decaying.
It's non.
It just takes the nth decimal of the time or something.
Okay, so it's not based on atomic decay. It is algorithmic.
If it's just random and then you couldn't predict it.
Basically, it's unpredictable. What you would call mathematical pseudo randomness. Mm-hmm. It's deterministic, but
what's it doing?
But. All it's doing is spitting out a number that you're not you're not
right, the nth decimal of the time when you push the button or whatever.
Yeah, it's a coin flip,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So the idea was everybody who downloaded this app would be running a pocket coin flipper basically, and then you would be able to use that permissioned data from every single phone to create a real-time luck map. Because you start seeing where, like the Global Consciousness Project looked at these...
What is considered good luck? If heads are good luck?
Well, hold on. The Global Consciousness Project did this deal where they looked at the spikes of...
You could tell cohesion, where this group's all getting the same thing.
Where suddenly it's
like
it's good 20 heads in a row. Right,
sure. Right, there's an anomalous...
But that's the global scale. That's the global scale.
And infinite universe, there'd be one universe that's doing that. If every version just happens, then there's one in which they all came up heads, right?
Right. But he's saying that the idea was if we could basically carpet the landscape in enough random number generators and monitor them in real time, then we could start to tease out geographic, almost like a weather map of where there are deviations from the random number sequence that we expect. And that it's been my experience that the kind of magical flow that you're talking about here, the manifestation vein, is that it's almost like it's a physical property. I mean, this is completely anecdotal and totally not rigorous, but it's like a different state of life. Like normally you occupy this.
Did you find it to be psychedelically like sensitive? Like what I do, if you don't know who I am, is I write about psychedelics for Erowid, and my personal experience of it is that it's amplified when you have more, let's call it bandwidth.
When you're paying more attention.
When you're paying more attention, so probably it's working if you're meditating a lot, if you're dancing a lot, if you're falling in love, right? Your heart chakra's open more. If you're, I don't know from chakras, but that feeling. And if you're certain things, it's like, the timing with this. People talk about, acid timing or whatever, the phones ring exactly when. And my personal experience, for instance, with, have you ever tried 5-MeO DMT? That's the one to me. Like, if I could only do one drug for the rest of my life, and I tell you from my perspective, it's like I have all the bandwidth, all of it, for just a second. The problem is if you hit the center of the target, you forget what you wanted. You forget your intention. So you got to slingshot around the motherfucker, or you've got to be, don't fall all the way in. Right, in Star Trek they slingshot around the sun.
Yeah.
Right,
well,
or you've got
to accelerate your
right, because if you fall on the gravity well, you forget. Or you've got to remember what you want, because it falls off asymptotically from the center, like real fast. So you got to remember what you want on the way in and pick it up as soon as you can on the way out, or you got to slingshot around it. Or I had a magical partner that we would find some way to get really in train. There's a bunch of potential strategies. I tell you the one I like, but and one of us could go all the way out and hit the center of the target. The other one remembers what we want. And so as one decent entity between us, freaking, we'd go to, what I thought was happening is we'd end up in the version in which, if there's, a multiverse in which, every possible variation that the math hangs together is quote unquote happening, right? And we could only move downhill in the sense that we could only move entropyward. And we could only move into consecutive frames. But, in some version, if you picture a Library of Babel, the Borges story, it's Library of Babel, there's actually an app now, or there's a computer program that has the idea of, every single possible, every variation of all the letters in a book. It's like, in a large enough set, there's some version in which you walk out there on the playa and a taco just falls into your hand. Some of them are very nearby. They're just freaking 5 minutes away in which that happens. And so I'm going towards versions in which that happens. There's a lot of them. There's potentially a transfinite number of versions in which that happens. Now the question to me is, am I dragging y'all with me? Are we all pulling the same instance? Or is this my registered copy? And I'm freaking moving towards versions in which, and maybe you're not. You could be going towards worlds with nuclear war, and I'm not, even though we're having this conversation and we're freaking passing through each other. And there'll be some version of me and yours. And there'll be some version of you and mine. Now, does that suggest that y'all's philosophical zombies will politesse and reasonable, what it seems like? We have to treat you as if you're also a person in something like my same predicament, right? But when you call for something that requires a cast of thousands to be on their mark, it's difficult to imagine a situation where everyone is doing that. Like, I must be, doing exactly the right things for your wishes to come true.
So how do you choose the wish? Because this is the thing, right?
So I don't think it's genie
If it is a cast of thousands,
right,
organized, then it's actually more parsimonious to suggest that you are an unwitting member of the conspiracy just like everyone else. And that...
Well, or that we're all one entity and we're all Hydra heads on...
Right. But that your wish is like automatic. It's a reflex. It's like you didn't... It's like you just happen to be the one that would wish that thing due to this particular biography, right? And so you're as weird as the taco that falls into your hand.
Right.
You know, like it's like who would wish for a taco to just fall into their hand?
Right.
Like, I mean, actually, a lot of us.
A lot of us. No, but you see people, even people who don't do this, and they come back from something like Burning Man, and they say, there was a phenomenon there. I'd wake up, and I'm thinking about this one kind of soda that only comes from Australia, and like, I go out, and right there on the corner, somebody's like, hey, do you want one of these? And I was like, wow, you hear those stories all the time there from people who don't talk about this, who've never heard the word manifestation. And like, do you know there was this weird thing that happened, right? And the way that you're saying it, the way I think of that is that it's determined and there's loops in it. So this is a piece of art, and the way you see it is down here looking through your eyes, and you're going to deliberate, and you're going to decide what you want to manifest, and you're going to wish for the thing that was going to happen anyway, because it's a piece of art and that's how it looks. And but from our point of view, it doesn't matter. From our point of view, we have to act like, it's like that thing of don't tell people they don't have free will, right? Like, sure, it may be determined, and we can have compassion for people who were going to fuck that up from the beginning of the universe, right? But from our point of view, we deliberate, we make choices, we have to move forward as if that is legitimate, because it's the same to us as if it is. It's the same to us. As if we're actively making choices, and it could go a different way, right? But I said in a multiverse, it could go a different way.
Because if I think that my wish led to, I mean, you get into this, like you fall into the solipsism, right? Like if I think that my wish is like what coordinated, that I'm like the powerful magician that got, you know, all of these people to deliver me this Australian soft drink, then I'm an asshole.
Well, right, no, so you pull a test and you can't act like that's the case, right? But experientially, it's the same as if it is, right? And you say, how do you choose your wish? I mean, what are you playing for, right? I have a little thing on my altar here that says, what are you playing for? Because metaphors, it's not any of the metaphors. Metaphors are things, it's like a thing that occurs in here, right? It's a school, it's a test, it's a trap, it's a prison. Most people think it's a school. Why did that happen to me? So I would learn something, right? I think of it as a massively multiplayer game and a collective work of art, because that metaphor is more fertile, flexible, aesthetically satisfying, effective for me for most applications than suggesting it's a trap or a prison or a school. I mean, sometimes it's useful to look at the world as if it's a battle between good and evil. I wouldn't want to live there, right? So it's good to have that lens. Take that lens out, you know, and put it back in your pocket. I think of it as a massively multiplayer game. So what are you playing for? The most awesome games, you get to choose what you're playing for. So you can play for most toys. You could play for most offspring. You could play for seeing the most of the map you can see, you know. And so what I'm playing for is most awesome for the most players for the longest. So when I don't know which thing to choose, which one goes for most awesome for most players for the longest. But if not being given the honor of sacrificing myself for, you know, all of Australia or something, I'm playing for most hits on my memories. And this is what has replaced it. Again, I don't capital believe it, but I don't disbelieve it. And it's what's replaced this idea of God to me. Like, you know, you want to feel like somebody's watching, and you're getting credit for the stuff that's not being seen somehow. And so I do shit for my fans on the Cosmic Periscope, right? It's in my Stardance fantasy. Like, we're all going to get to share our memories someday. Whether or not it's true, if you play as if, you're going to one day get to share all of your memories.
Like, if you knew that at the end of your life, your brain would be eaten by something that would then, like in Annihilation or whatever, would like take your memory into itself and remember being you, you know? How would that change the way you live?
Right. No, exactly. So what, if you knew that everything is being constantly uploaded, right? If as above, so to below, I think it's becoming more self-similar. The universe is becoming more like it, physically like it is. I don't know if energetically is the right. No, I know, but it's becoming more like it is in a sense, and so it's computers are starting to mirror the thing more closely, and so that Aldous Huxley, like the brain is a reducing valve. I prefer your brain as like your desktop computer. It's not the internet, right? It's reaching out there and it's selecting from the superabundance the piece of information that in fact is actually useful to you or that you're calling here for right now. And some of the data is being stored locally. And, every time you bring this memory up, you edit it, right? And that's being stored on your hard drive. But if everything you experience is actually going into the cloud, right? I don't know if you've ever done a BOGA like Ibogaine. Mm. Oh my God!
But you wrote a really good piece on it.
Yeah, no, if you look up Teafaerie Hard Reset, you'll find it. But like every freaking thing, it's like the real memory, not the memory that I've edited every time I brought it up. Oh shit, this is what actually happened. I forgot, right? And like it's happening now, not like I remember 5 minutes ago. Like this is. So.
The Russians talked about that in the Cold War.
Really?
Yeah,
Ibogaine?
Well, no, not about Ibogaine, but they talked about consciousness being an electromagnetic phenomenon, and they took a completely different scientific trajectory in the 20th century, and they studied the possibility. Like they were convinced that the Earth's magnetic fields were like a carrier wave, and that memories were being stored in the magnetic fields of our planet. Mm. At least some of them were.
I mean, I don't understand how that medium would work, but I don't know that it wouldn't work, right? Mm. I guess I don't think that if this is a simulation, say, we wouldn't see the medium it's being stored on in here. Just like if you're in World of Warcraft, you wouldn't see the servers that it's on, right? But nevertheless, again, as above, so below, to some degree, I think that a lot of it's going up into the cloud. Not what's being stored on your local hard drive, but any program that doesn't suck now practically is up, so you don't lose those pictures. It's just automatically uploading them to the cloud. So I'm playing for most awesome for most players for the longest, but I play for my audience on the Cosmic Periscope, right? I got a lot of followers on the Cosmic Periscope in my world, and they are, when I do something and I'm proud of it and nobody saw that, salute freaking my audience, and it makes you want to live elegantly when you're not being watched.
So we're back-ending into the way that we started the first conversation that we had for this show, which was, so you were actually one of the major inspirations for this show.
Yeah.
Because of this idea of the Cosmic Periscope, this idea like that we are future fossils, that we are being transformed by our consideration of living in light of the knowledge that the future is watching.
If I can trace it to the future.
Right. I can trace it to you, and I can trace it to Arthur C. Clarke's last novel, which he wrote with the badass science fiction author Steve Baxter, The Light of Other Days, which is about how we can't travel through time. We can't travel our bodies through time, it turns out, because the wormhole is only big enough to admit like photons at a time.
But information ought to be teleportable.
But we can still look into the past. And simply looking into the past is enough to completely transform everything about human society. And
God, Arthur C. Clarke, actually. Did you read Childhood's End? So good. It was like the first story dancing one to me. But like when the aliens in that, like, give the historical society a gift that makes them able to see anything that happened in the past, and like all religions fall within a generation.
Yeah, so he took the same idea. He took the same idea and explored it in more depth in this last book, where, it turns out, Jesus was the bastard son of a Roman soldier, etc. And every race realizes that they were the persecutors of the genocide of some other race at one point. And
everybody is the product of billions of years of caveman rape. And
right. Everybody has a super apology and grief session.
Yeah, can we just start over? Can we start over? Like, it's been hard. It was hard to evolve to here. Can we just have one? Can we just give everybody a start over? And
then we use the photon wormholes to connect our brains. Yeah. And then suddenly, we're able to create a light web of brain-to-brain direct communication, and we're able to share each other's experiences, and then I think it really is like the thesis for Arthur C. Clarke's The Star Child that he posits in 2001. He comes back around and he talks about a new humanity that is a single agent, like a single individual.
I think that's probably what the adult form looks like. I think that this is partly, like I said, this is how a baby God grows up. So I think that this is the juvenile. It moves from singularity through multiplicity to a higher order singularity.
Yeah.
And part of how it becomes a higher order singularity is through the process of multiplicity.
Well, it's like cell differentiation.
Because it has to push off of itself. Otherwise, it's just floating there like, oh, there's no evolution without friction. And so in order for the thing to... Oh, God, CRISPR. This one's really important. I don't think I said this one to you. Maybe we talked about this last time. But
in the discussion of God embryogenesis, no, CRISPR is key.
No, it is. It's so important, which is that I think this must happen on every planet in which life is a thing at all. Anything remotely like DNA, right? So drop a DNA on a planet. Let's just say it evolved there. Who cares, right? And it unfolds and eats each other and unfolds and finds a new niche. And, we see polar bears and poplar trees because of the way that we are moving through time. But from DNA's perspective, it's never been anything but one entity, right? Because that's never anything but that freaking piece of DNA folding itself and complicating itself. And it has to, in order for evolution to proceed, it has to survival compete with winners and losers, where only the winners breed. Mostly the winners breed, right? That's what winning is. Until it can intelligently upgrade its genome. At which point it makes more sense, for speed of evolution's sake, for it to collapse into a singularity and start upgrading itself intelligently. But until it gets there, it has to winners and losers compete with survival as a factor in killing each other. And like every time it gets there, it must be freaking touching the bottom rung of the thing with its fingertips. And to get that freaking technology, it has to have been competing with losers die until it gets that. And that's the same point at which you could freaking wipe out the species. It's got to be a freaking coin flip every time it happens. It's so close. It's just, it's a freaking such a close race between survival and catastrophe, right?
Well, so if I'm to understand you correctly, what you're saying
you follow me?
Yeah, what you're saying is that there comes a point where it actually becomes evolutionarily advantageous to intentionally increase the rate of potentially fatal mutations, knowing that you have...
That we already have potentially fatal mutations.
That we have reversibility. Or that when you have more editing power over the genome, that...
Right, and like I said, the rich will get it first to make the beginner's mistakes, and power to them.
You can...
Thank you for being our brave pioneers.
The ability to edit the genome is going to move us out of a phase of competition for particular gene sets, precisely because it's like there's less consequence.
Imagining DNA or the evolutionary impulse or whatever, again, maybe this is a stretch, but imagining that as an intelligent, aware process. It's smarter for it to then start upgrading itself intelligently than to just still be going, say it has however long till the sun explodes, right? It's freaking slow motion to have it be random mutations is how it's upgrading itself. When it's intelligent enough to do it on purpose. And people immediately go to Hitler and eugenics. Oh, what happens if we start improving ourselves on purpose? Look, you were about to have a baby. If you could make sure that it didn't have freaking Down syndrome or something by just Would you do that? Of course you would.
That's the David Pierce argument. Did
What?
we talk about that?
I don't remember.
Well, he was on Review the Future podcast. David
Review the
Pierce
Future. I mean, I'll give it a 3 stars.
He's like the ethical transhumanist. David Pierce is the one, PEARCE. He's the one who wrote
I've
the
heard his name.
Anti-Speciesist Manifesto, where he's comparing the brain anatomy of like pigs and chickens and baby human beings and like 5-year-olds.
Oh, yeah, I heard your thing about that.
Yeah. So he said in Review the Future that you've got to... The argument is exactly your argument, that if you knew that there was an edit that you could make to this unborn child, that they would live a happier life, and you didn't do it, basically you're a piece of shit.
Well, and it's like, okay, but like it would give it an unfair advantage over other potential embryos, and it's like, yes, that's what we've been going for the entire time. You know, is giving your offspring theoretically an unfair advantage.
We should all have an unfair advantage.
Well, no, exactly. Which, again, would suck if the winners are going to kill the losers. Right? But let's say the winners are not going to kill the losers. Let's say that the winners are just going to intelligently upgrade the next generation even better. And pretty soon none of us get fucking cancer. And all of us have perfect vision. And all of us are smarter than... Are we bright enough to, like, know the right direction? And it's like, oh... We wanted to make everybody more mathematically intelligent and didn't give them better musical ability or something because we don't have the aesthetic sensibility to point the thing in a right direction. Well, there ain't nobody to judge that but ourselves. You know, so we as parents who have had this long history of the human race to decide what we want our kid to have, we're going to make the best call that we can make, and we're not going to make a perfect call. And there'll be other parents who make different calls, and the ones that are thriving and happy and being like, oh, I'm like I want to be. I mean, sure, let's make them like however they want to be. It's all a complication, but like, would it be better to just stick with freaking random mutations?
You know, you're bringing up something for me, which I've arguably have spent my entire life contemplating this whole thing with the Frankenstein and Jurassic Park. You know, this issue of tampering with nature, right?
Tampering with playing God. Well, look, that's little kids have to play adult, right?
Right. So
we all play. Little kids play grown-ups. We have to play God.
It's so much more complicated, or nuanced, I should say. It's so much more nuanced than the way that people typically discuss it. Because, again, it's this issue of, you know, like we think of ourselves as tampering with nature and trying to play God precisely because we are wrong-sighted in our estimation that we're somehow like outside the system operating on it, when in fact...
Right, that assumes that we're a player consciousness down in here playing a character consciousness, not a part of it. We came out of it, not into it.
Right, that we're not of the simulation.
Right.
And so, you know, for me, I think like, in a way, I've been trying to exercise radical, I call it faith, you know, trust in the process, that... Even though
this is what faith means to me. I wrote on the temple at Burning Man, I will trust the process. This is what faith means. Is the assumption that if I could see it from every point of view at once and I understood it, you know, the intention of the simulators or whatever. I don't think it's Sky Santa, you know, it could be planet-sized quantum computers working together. I don't think they're worried about...
Krampus.
I don't think it's worried about what we're doing with our willies or anything like that. But like, if we could understand that mind, that we would find it aesthetically satisfying. Like, ultimately aesthetically satisfying. If we got it, that we would be like, yes, that's what faith is to me. That it's, you know, the direction evolution is going in is ultimately aesthetically satisfying. If not to ourselves, then to something greater than ourselves. Either the thing to come, the it looking back.
Yeah.
You know, or like, there's parts of it that are not. Do you know the Silmarillion?
I haven't read it.
Okay. I know everyone gets caught up in the who begats in the beginning, you know, like in the beginning of the Bible, and they begat them, and they begat them, right? But it's the Elvish creation myth from Lord of the Rings, and it's in fact what's happening in that world. And the god, you know, Iluvatar, sort of creates the angels, you know, the Iron, whatever, and propounds to them great themes of music, and then says, all right, now you guys are going to make music, and I will hearken to it. And they make music, and sort of the element that becomes the Sauron Melkor element starts trying to cause a bunch of dissonance and pull the music over to themselves, and it ends in this big crashing cacophony. and they come back before the throne of glory, and they're like, oh, sorry, we suck so much. And the God's like, no, no, no. Now see it as I have seen it, from every point of view simultaneously. And you will see that there was never a note out of place. Because how could that be? It was never anything but my, white light shining through a prism in the first place. And so, you're always going to get the whole spectrum of color.
Right. God loves Rex.
Right.
Well, that's the whole thing.
But
God loves,
see it as I have seen it, and you'll
crashes.
see. And now let's instantiate it into 3D and go down in 4D or whatever. Let's go down and live it out. And that's what Lord of the Rings is. So why is it the person's son because it's like a fugal thing, right? Here's the music again, and a variation of the music again, and it's playing out the music of the Ainu in the first place.
Exactly.
Right?
So
from every point of view at once, I think that it's aesthetically satisfying. I think that it would be. Like, what is your favorite symphony or your favorite movies? Like, if you were eternal or very long-lived, you would be over universes that pulled punches really quickly.
But you and I...
This thing doesn't pull punches at all.
You and I have both a highly cultivated taste for, catastrophe.
Well, because I think maybe, of course we would think this, but because we're closer to, closer to the aesthetics.
I think about, the
I'm not sick though. I don't like horror movies. I don't like to see like I said, sick porn. I don't like stuff that's about how fucked up it can be, right? But what is your favorite movies and symphonies, whatever? It's the thing that it built itself up and then it freaking crushed itself down into the muck, and then it built itself up again. Do you know? Olaf Stapleton.
Of course, I know Olaf Stapleton.
Oh,
he's like my
God.
dog.
Freaking in the 30s, killed it. Every single genre of science fiction just laid it down and it stayed there.
I was just telling my coworkers at Santa Fe Institute to look into radium age science fiction because the 1930s are totally underappreciated.
Every freaking genre of science fiction occurs in Last and First Men. The first sentient computer story with the brains. The first. Just name all the things.
A bit of exposition.
Okay,
Olaf Stapleton, Last and First Men, and Star Maker are two of the most influential works of science fiction ever written.
So good.
Arthur C. Clarke talked about it. Isaac Asimov talked about it. H.P. Lovecraft, as a contemporary, considered these works some of the most important works.
And everybody was inspired by it who writes. People say, Heinlein got the first. He read the stuff, the first one of all these genres, right?
Yeah.
But so going back to the point, this is the best written thing I've ever seen about this viewpoint, which is it raises itself up and it's crushed back into the muck. It's like 18 species of men. The next one freaking eats it, and then another species arises out of that thing and evolves again, and then freaking eats it, and it finally makes it to the not generation, but entire us to freaking Australopithecus or whatever. And from the point of view of the thing that can see everything that's ever happened in this universe, it finds that it is good. It finds that it is beautiful. And so it may not be beautiful from our one little camera angle. Oh, one little camera angle just had 3 kids and they died in a fire and they freaking died of cancer. And it's my faith is not that it's going to work out for me. My faith is that it's beautiful and that I'm part of a beautiful work of art. From, if not my perspective, then from the perspective that can see it out of every camera angle at once. And let's assume that thing is in the future. We're all uploading ourselves. All of our memories are going into the cloud, and it can see them all. And from light's point of view, right? If you're a lighticle, and you were created in, let's say there was a Big Bang, and you're going to, let's say there's a black hole at the end of time. From the point of view of light, it got there in not even one Planck length of space and time. Light got there instantly, and it took every path to get there. So from that thing's point of view, it's not even waiting for it. We watched light go 100,000 years across the sky, but from its point of view, it got there instantly, and it took every path to get there. So from the point of view of the mind I'm talking about, bam, it all happened. And it's fucking beautiful. It goddamn better well be. I have to believe that it is. I choose to believe that it is because that's the thing that gets me up in the morning and being like, yeah, let's keep playing for this thing. It's not some fucked up universe that the goal is to get out of it. I've hated that. That's the thing I don't like about Buddhism. It's which I mostly love, which is, okay, we're trying to get out of this thing. And if I meditate properly, and if I don't have any fun, and if I follow the rules, this time when I die, I'm going to join the blissful singularity, and I'm not going to have to be a guy again. I'm just going to get through all the levels and beat the game. I'm just going to get through all the levels and beat the game, right?
That's the second and third turn, though, right? Because that's Theravada Buddhism versus Mahayana Buddhism.
What's the big boat in the...
Mahayana Buddhism says nirvana is not other than samsara, right? That was the whole twist with Zen, is that they were like, you're trying to get away from what exactly? I thought so.
Like I said, if you're seeing that as a massively multiplayer game, this is I got through all the levels and beat the game. So I stopped creating karma, and like I got through all the levels of the thing, and I beat the game immediately. And it's like, okay, but can I have your extra lives if you're not going to eat that? Because I actually love this. I haven't seen all the Easter egg levels yet. I'm really, really into it.
You just reminded me when I was a teenager.
I mean, that's legit. You can play for anything you want. You can play for go through all the levels and beat the game. Maybe there's a better game to be played out here. But that's I want to hear that. But like the other thing about it, about seeing it as a massively multiplayer game, is it centralizes you. So now you're the fucking customer. You who this is buying for and about. I wouldn't be here if this didn't get 4 stars in universes.com. If this is a game, it's made to amuse such as ourselves.
So there was...
when you're a teenager.
There was a bumper sticker that my friend had on her car that... I met this woman digging in a dinosaur quarry in Wyoming.
What's your name? First name, we'll salute her.
Corinne.
Do.
And yeah, Corinne, very cool woman. She was actually a... I guess I don't know which subdomain of Catholicism. It's like, is it the Episcopals that let women be priests? I forget.
Oh, I don't remember.
But she was a priest and an amateur dinosaur enthusiast. And when I got my Jeep stuck in a creek the first summer that I took my car out and used it as a field vehicle, she was the one that hung out with me in the wilderness and waited for the tow.
AAA. Thank you, AAA.
It wasn't AAA.
Whatever.
It was Robert Bacher, the lead paleontologist. But she and I were the ones that decided we were going to hang out in the Wyoming Badlands and watch the sunset. You know,
beautiful,
cool woman. Anyway, she said that she had a bumper sticker on her car that says, "When the rapture happens, can I have your car?"
Well, and here's another thing about people who potentially might upload themselves to bring this thing back around. So to whom will their stuff in 3D? Like there might be some kind of deal where it's like, you know, the reason they worry about euthanasia being a problem is like potentially inheritees will be like, why don't you go ahead and go for that rather than spending all of your money on the last, month of your life in the hospital so we can have it, right? And if you could convince people, like my favorite Dark Mirror is San Junipero, of course, because it's one of the only ones that doesn't have a sad ending in a way.
Although the Black Museum episode
it hurts, though.
talks about St. Juniper's Hospital, and it's like that episode was like single-handedly enough to make me reconsider naming a potential daughter Juniper. I was like,
Was that the hospital where they were getting uploaded from?
The brain experiments and
right.
The Googles, the dead souls uploaded into computers.
So imagine, that's server farm, but like let's convince these guys. Okay, you've got a month left to live. How about you pay all the money, some amount of the money that you have towards we'll keep you going in this thing. And again, they'll be slick salesmen before it's good who are like, yeah, we'll put you on ice in our basically...
Which is what the whole episode was about, was the guy who was it was his job to sell experimental uploading to medical
and
anomalies.
Having seen it, it didn't suck, right? But the first version is going to be you're uploaded to AOL or something, right? There's just little flashing, right? Talking about the low glow or whoever's paying for this, right?
Yeah.
But who's going to inherit your car? Like, what do people have... what do people have to gain by convincing people to just go ahead and go? Oh, I wrote a short story years ago.
Well, that's the thing, is you got to... legally, this is the mess, And now we're tearing into, like... This is a whole tab off this episode, right? But like... John C. Wright
rip up a tab for me.
John C. Wright talked about this in The Golden Age. This issue of duplicating yourself... through noumenal recording, the recording of the soul.
Noumenal. Oh, wow. That's a good word.
And in his books, the machines figured it out. They figured out how to copy a person's soul. And so then you get into these issues of priority with respect to multiple copies and who has legal rights to the stuff.
It's saying that they managed to copy themselves back out into a robot or something.
It is a non-trivial issue. Yeah.
Well, no, if they were able to push themselves back out into presumed reality and get their stuff again.
Even if you don't,
what do you need with your stuff? If you're in that server for somewhere, you don't need anything with your stuff.
frankly, the whole San Junipero thing seems a little unlikely to me. I think it's much more likely that people are going to be uploading themselves into robots that live in our world. Because...
not Gleisner, but say you have... Because you could look just like a freaking... What's that best Samantha or something at this point? There's robots, right?
Yeah.
Telepresence robots.
Yeah, because... And to weave Annalee Newitz back into this in Autonomous, she talks about the machines having this,
God, you're right, that's probably first.
Augmented reality architecture,
right,
and, all this beautiful stuff, like in, was it Matsushi's or Hyper Reality, that 6-minute video where she goes into the grocery store and AR has the grocery store looking all crazy, but then when it glitches,
I saw that.
It glitches, it's just like an empty warehouse with a bunch of QR codes. But at any rate...
God, I forgot about that.
Yeah, so... So there's this thing. I think that it's not that we just disappear into virtual realities because.
Well, I said because at least at the beginning it's empty in there. This is more interesting.
The VR AR thing is going to converge before that even happens.
Yes, if you go to a robot, then surely you're the one who has responsibility for your stuff. Oh, I see. If you duplicate yourself. Well, this is another one of those Greg Egan problem. What's the other one? Permutation City, right?
So, I did not read that one.
Oh, let me recommend it. Permutation City is, speaking of Rick and Morty, it's every problem with the cloning thing. Every one I ever thought of in 6th grade and more of them, of what happens when... I used to write this on my arm, and I saw someone who had a tattoo that says, "You are not the copy." Because... on the wrist, because she... get yourself scanned, and then after she was scanned, she wrote, "You're not the copy." When she comes...
Any sufficiently advanced 3D printer would tattoo you.
Well, no, because they scanned her completely, and then as she was, going to sleep in the hospital, she wrote, "You're not the copy." Wakes up, okay. But the one inside of it, because one of the rules of it is that a copy can always turn themselves off. It was just one of the ethical laws that they put in. So you try this 50 times, but the copy always just turns itself off. Fuck this, right? And so really know yourself. You're okay, if I turn out to be the copy... I'm going to be the homework clone who sits there and does all my homework. And the other one gets to live an awesome life because it just has my job. And I'm living in what looks like my apartment, but I do all my work that I was doing. And I know that my other self somewhere is kicking it on the beach. And, but every time they're oh, fuck, I'm not doing it.
I think the more realistic thing is that it's going to be easier for us to... and this is just...
So one of those says, well, what if I just make 5 of myself and massively parallel that homework in here? How many of us can we make? And then we do all that work instantly. And now we've got 10 of us.
Right, so can you afford the server space for that?
Some stories that's a problem. I'm talking about a world in which that's not a problem. How many more doublings of Moore's Law? Well, we say we have 6 more until we keep thinking that. But, let's just say obscene quantum computing, and that's not the problem. Right? This is my idea of what's happening with the multiverse in the first place. If it's every version where the math hangs together, it's because something is massively paralleling us. Whether it's thing that's trying to work out 42 or whatever is the answer and just running a billion copies of this. If the multiverse and if massively parallel, it's comforting in the sense that we get through our cultural adolescence in n high 10 number of universes, right? It's not comforting in that I say superhero because shaman, I don't know what a shaman is. I know what a superhero is, has powers, tries to save the world, right? But I'm not superhero enough to stand and all of them happen. Because awesome, that means that we make it in however many universes, but I'm a child molester in however many universes, and I die horribly in however many.
Transfinitely.
Transfinitely. And if that's what it takes then what do we have left? Just cosmic Calvinism? Well, I'm lucky to be this guy. And, there's a bunch of them with the same past and different futures, so we all have the same karma. We have the same past that every moment is whipping off into different futures. We all deserve what we deserve, but it goes every single possible way. Then we're just lucky to be this guy, and it's just if it's either determined or or all of them happen, then why the hell am I trying to cut a path through this thing, right? Why am I... It's artistically offensive to me. It devalues my art.
I wonder about...
but maybe just because I can't fucking take it, right?
Well, no, I think that you and I have come back time and time again to this thing, which is that, why am I trying to cut a path through this is really the same question as, where does the wish come from? What it...
Right, if it's determined, then that's just what you're going to wish, right?
Yeah. And
this is my husband's view. He doesn't take psychedelics anymore. He's a Jason Naylor. He's an amazing man. But he's just like, yeah, I figured out it's a trick universe. I don't need to keep digging at that. It's like as if you've climbed up into the movie projector room and you've stuck a screwdriver in the projector and you're like, look, it's a movie. It's frozen on one frame. And you're like, yeah, now take the fucking screwdriver out of it and let it run, because this is how it's meant to be seen, one frame at a time. Like, look, it's a movie. I proved it. Yeah, take the screwdriver out of it and let it run. Why do you want to mess with that and prove it? It's enough to go, okay, it's a trick universe, obviously. It's meant to be viewed one frame at a time. Why are you trying to mess with it? I'm like, for all the obvious reasons. And he's like, okay, go persist in your folly. You will become wise.
This is, I know this is a good place to swirl this into a single cohesive.
Oh God, I know, because we've been probably at it for 2 hours again. We love you, future people. I hope it's awesome in the future.
And past. I know you're listening to. What do you think are the obvious reasons for wanting to jam your screwdriver in the projector? Once you know.
Oh, I think he's probably right.
It's a trick universe. Then why do you keep petitioning the wish-fulfilling jewel?
Curiosity, okay, is, like I said, it's the devil. My Burning Man camp is Prometheatrics, right? Bringing fire to mankind since the dawn of time. I figured out why fire and language are associated, because you're sitting around a circle at night facing each other suddenly. But, right, when we got that, suddenly, instead of going to sleep at night, we sat around a circle facing each other. No more work to be done. But, if it wasn't for this, I think there's evolutionary potential in it. That's why. Because I think that there always has been. I think that cavemen whose wishes came true had more babies. If you were wishing for a mate or some food and it came to you, you survived. And so I feel like there's evolutionary potential in getting good at steering towards versions in which I would love to steer towards versions in which we avoid some kind of horrible apocalypse. Or apocalypse just means lifting of the veil or whatever, but that we have
Armageddon.
Yeah.
Yes, less classy.
I'm trying to move towards versions in which positive evolution continues. Positive, again, meaning aesthetically satisfying to myself, or, we may lose a continent on the play. If there's any aesthetic justice, the one we live on. But moving towards universes in which the career of novelty is not in danger.
You're suggesting
it has an evolutionary value.
You're suggesting that there's a macroevolutionary ratchet towards magic. Well,
no, this is how we ended it last time, actually. This was important. This means something. My husband actually had me made, Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Uh-huh.
It's a cross-stitch thing made of mashed potatoes, and it says, this means something. This is important, right? Because I'm like, I'm just staring at it. I know this means something. This is important, right? But this means something. This is important. When I manifest something, when I, have all the bandwidth and try to move into the version in which it had to start in the past. What I'm thinking of, it had to be coming to me for a long time, which is evidence towards that's what was going to happen anyway. I get it. You're right about that. Like I said, it's still the same for us. In which case, universes are more likely that have sentient entities in the future that are back manifesting all of this. That are pulling like a magnet the world towards itself. It's that push and pull evolution. Some of it's being pushed from behind, and some of it's being pulled forward like a magnet. And versions that there are sentient beings in the future who are wishing for all of this to come true, because they're outside of time. Their wish is outside of time, are pulling this thing towards itself. And so versions in which there's no sentience in the future are less likely to occur than ones in which there are. And so in that sense, it's an evolutionary ratchet, because the ones that are more evolved, and let's just say more conscious even, are more likely.
Now, I'm
not saying that's true. I'm saying I like that idea.
Yeah. Okay. Me too. And I know that if you have listened this far, that chances are you haven't had your psychological immune system inflamed by the speculation here. So it probably will offend no one to bring up John Joe McFadden of the University of Surrey, whose book Quantum Evolution I read in high school in Wyoming, in the dinosaur quarry, and which completely changed my whole perspective on... Actually, I guess I read it in college.
You were going to be like a paleontologist at some point or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, this book is one of 3 to 5 books that I would identify as having derailed that because...
Seminal to you.
Yeah, because... And shout out to Bruce Damer.
Oh, God, I love Dr. Bruce.
Yeah,
I love him,
Origins
love
of
him,
Life
love him.
Research.
Oh, my God. I love him. Not just intellectually, I love him as a person, like we're friends.
John Joe McFadden spoke to in this book was the possibility of quantum computing and the parallel processing of superpositioned macromolecules, organic molecules, in a quantum superposition, leading to an instantaneous eruption of life. That the reason that it exists as far back as we can seek it in the fossil record.
Is this like part of the morphic fields idea?
Well,
like,
no.
There's the one that's most likely...
I mean, I guess kind of, yeah. But it's tangential. I mean, or rather, it's further down.
Right, so macromolecules.
So the idea being that, you have this thing, the complexity of a living cell, or, even the simplest self-reproducing molecule is vastly too complex, and to their credit, Damer and his team...
Well, just long strings of polymers or something, it's impossible. Like
They've made... No,
here we are, so it's not impossible.
They've made 300... 500 MERS.
Oh, no, we started over. It's like, no, we started it. This is how life started. Like, we did it. We did it a few times,
Yeah, and I'm prepared to be proven wrong about this, but I do like that John Joe McFadden had this proposal, which was that life could have been one of these deals where it reached the complexity required for it to reproduce, to become a self-reproducing molecule in the quantum phase space, and that its reproduction collapsed the wave function. That as soon as it reproduced, it required resources and therefore interacted with the surrounding environments.
But massively paralleled all the potentials until one of them was real enough.
Left superposition. So what it basically means is that what he was saying...
I think this is happening in the quantum computer in the first place.
As soon as you have the basic ingredients in place, it happens right away, because the inevitability it's a self-determining...
It seems like it was about as fast as it could have been, like almost when the planet was cooled enough for it to be. We had, self-replicating long strings, like...
Yeah, I know that future Bruce Damer is rolling in his grave listening to us talk about this. Current living Bruce Damer would probably have some interjections he would wish to process, but
Heisenberg is rolling with unknowable momentum in his grave when he...
I bring all that stuff up because what you're saying is basically that. This notion that the greater, more inclusive, more intelligent, more magical thing, reality, whatever you want to call it, that it backcasts its own... It creates its own rationale. It choreographs its own history. And
this may be the only time that's actually happening. If it's like, I'm not saying this is likely. I think that the past makes sense, but it makes sense is plausible. But there's supposedly as many people alive right now as there's been people since art. Like 6 billion people or something, 7, and that's as many people as ever lived. As this instance of a game, right, on this server, we're at this level of complexity where it really seems like it's a bifurcation point. That's what you're saying about why you started this podcast in the first place. If we make it to the future, then the people of the future are really interested in this time. Like, there's as many people studying the Greek Renaissance as there were people in the Greek Renaissance, like more people now. Let's say we make it to hundreds of worlds for billions of years, or it's too far to star travel, but we make it to hundreds of servers for billions of subjective years or whatever. All of those people this is the make or break point. How did we get through this time? How many things had to go right? God, all of them. How many things had to go right? All of them for them to be sitting there right now. God, we must have back-propagated themselves, we're saying. We must have freaking back-manifested ourselves. There was no freaking way that aliens betting on people right now would think that we were going to make it through this time. And they would be...
Unless they know what you know.
Unless they know what we know. But if you're just looking at it, sort of naively from the outside,
counting cards.
No, they're fucked. They're fucked, right? But if, like I said, if you're betting that we're going to lose the game and sitting there with your hands on your hips going like, we're screwed, whatever. What do you, if you bet that we are going to make it, and you're right, the people of the future, you could be a hero.
I've always had a problem with conversations about probability, because probability...
How likely is this?
Yeah, because probability...
The probability is 1-to-1. We're standing here, right? Probability is about our probability that we're going to correctly guess.
Right. Probability is, I think, is a determinant of the knowledge of the system, right? Working at SFI, I just read this piece, Artemy Kolchinsky and David Wolpert just put out this piece on an information theory definition of meaning. And their whole thing about meaning was that meaning, basically, and I'm butchering this, but is a pattern in information that's relevant to the physical system perceiving it, such that,
what is the meaning of meaning or whatever?
Yeah. Well, that it's like that it has to be relevant to the continued existence of that system in whatever way.
Or just amusing to us
for it to have meaning. Otherwise, it's just neutrinos like flying through us, penetrating us constantly without interacting. It's just ghosts or whatever. It doesn't, it's the X-ray becomes, again, like the gamma wave becomes significant to the extent that we can sort of realize that
it's just an information
there's a
theory
survival deal involved there, and that we can detect it, and that we can adjust, and that we can perceive and respond, and that cybernetic component of it is really essential.
Where X versions of it are just going to be gobbledygook or whatever, like most of them in the Library of Babel thing.
Well, it's just that there's so much information that has no meaning, but it's not that it has no meaning, it's that it has no meaning to you.
Right.
Right.
Something else could look at this
meaning
again.
Meaning is not an objective property. It's
I don't
about
think
the
that
relationship
it is.
between.
Like I said, there's an information theory idea for it, but basically meaning is something later in history that goes back and finds that thing, might be able to, or might have, if they had encountered, have been able to draw meaning from the thing. Like, maybe nobody ever encounters this piece of information and is able to sew it into meaning, but potentially they could have. In some variation, they do.
Yeah. And so, in a sense, it's like if you and I know that everything that happened leading up to this moment had to happen in order for us to be here, then if we were capable of paying the requisite amount of attention to this situation, then we would consider everything that has ever happened to be to be suffused with meaning, because it's relevant, because it was necessary for the conditions of our being, for our existence.
I think that it probably is, but because this is the history that got us here, and there may have been shorter paths. Again, if quantum massively multiplayer or whatever, or massively processed thing, then sure, maybe this was the shortest path. Maybe we're standing in the shortest path to get to the future, and it's just long. From our perspective, it's long. There wasn't a shorter path, right? This is the best of all possible worlds in the sense that it's the shortest and most aesthetically satisfying path to get to where it's going. And it's just, there wasn't a version in which. But like I said, if you were eternal or very long-lived, you would get over candy universes immediately. I mean, immediately as in billions and billions and trillions of years. It's like, okay, we did a bunch of universes in which Star Maker's like, oh, okay, everything happens happily and it gets to the thing, and then everything happens happily and it gets to us again. And it's like, oh, it's not art, it doesn't touch you. It's not like, oh, right, like, how beautiful is the thing when it freaking transcends all of that and breaks through into this more awesome, glorious thing. Like, it's better than and the candy universe doesn't evolve. Because if there's not actual survival pressure, evolution only happens when there's actual survival pressure. So in one where everything just happens happily, we never get past caveman days. Because it never evolves. It doesn't need to. It's perfectly fine as it is. There's no friction. Evolution requires friction. That's dukkha in the Buddhist, the thing that rubs against itself. But if you don't have something that rubs against it, if you don't rub it against it, you ain't going to get no evolution, right? And so it's just necessary, and it's part of the art. And
the boundary conditions.
I'm into it. Because you damn well better be. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Oh.
What do we got? We're not cutting this in half again. I'm not letting you.
No, let's end it.
All right. We can do it again someday.
Teafaerie.
I love you.
I know
You're so
I love
good.
you too.
I love your short story. Oh my god, the 95. I was seriously me and Heather who brought me here.
Was it
the future,
91? Right?
Was it 91?
I think it was 91. Oral History of the End of Reality.
Yes. I love that short story. Me and Heather, who brought me here, were rolling around on the ground going like, oh. Do you have other fiction? Like when
I do not have other fiction.
Oh, you should make some. It was so good.
But you also have this epic science fiction novel that you've been writing since I met you. Long before I met you. That remains unpublished and unshared, to my knowledge. I've never seen it.
I mean, I should know. Yes, but the thing that's going to come out soon is my book of Erowid essays. And like I said, I write a column for Erowid called Tea Time. Psychedelic musings from the center of the universe. And I've been doing it for 10 years. So I just passed 10 years writing for Erowid. That's right, I'm 44, bitches. I typed my papers in college.
If you're writing for Erowid career where a child, Jean Piaget, would say it had arrived at formal operational cognition by now.
Right, no, I could die and it could catch lizards on its own or whatever. It's fine. It's made it, right? It made it. I wrote Mapping the Source, which is my long poem about 5-MeO-DMT, and then I actually did a sequel for that that's not on Erowid called Carrying the Light. And if you look up Teafaerie Carrying the Light, you can find the audio, which was telling off all the quote-unquote shamans who are blazing into town and charging $400 a pop and lighting 10 of them up, right? And then there hasn't been, which I'm fine with people charging money, but like if it's what they say that it is, it's not set them up and knock them down. It's not the way to play this thing. You can get married in a wedding chapel in Vegas with, Elvis in a line, but like if this is really this big a deal, why not have it be all about you? You and let's say at least your nesties and your friends or whatever, not random strangers.
Well, somebody has got to charge people money to.
No, I said, farmers, doctors, nannies, shrinks, masseuses, priests, and whores is getting paid for sake of work. It's okay to charge for yours, right? But if you are putting profit over people, right? It's fine to charge for this thing, but like, what was part of the bit was. What a quintessentially American modality. We've done found ourselves a drive-through enlightenment machine. Step right up and lay right down. All this can be you for the low price of all the market will bear, because we've done found ourselves a cheat code. And I'm saying, we're going to be these neo-Buddhist little old ladies sitting on our virtual front porch going like, back in my day, we didn't have no nanites in our neuron shit. We didn't even have no halfway decent drugs. We just had to try to hypnotize ourselves. We're just sitting there trying to think about not trying to think about anything. But
see you there knitting your neural lace on the rocking chair.
Yeah, no, exactly. But like a fake rocking chair, virtual back. Anyway, so Carrying the Light. But it's been 3 years since I put out anything because I promised the next thing. I've got a backlog of things. I'm writing an essay right now about our mutual friend Robin's about machines, basically, about VR psychedelic experiences.
You're talking about Robin Arnott's video game Sound Self.
Yeah, Sound Self, which is freaking amazing. And his company's now putting out Andrew Jones's microdose thing, which was also partly based on a short story that I wrote, actually. Static Realm. Oh, no,
Andrew will
tell you.
Be on the show soon.
Oh, really? Well, ask him. The heroes of my short story were people who were making the live holography in like these hyper-connected dance parties, and what they were imagining with their mind was sort of dripping down between us. And so you can stand with a microdose on and be making the stuff that's like dripping down around all the people dancing if you do it in his dome. That's why he put my partner on the 2011 Burning Man ticket, because we were the people who wrote that thing, right?
VR and 2D projectors are just not cutting it for me.
No, it's coming. It's coming. Dude, I know it's in its infancy, dude. It's coming fast. But if you will put the mask on, though, and you can look around in it, right? But the thing about the dome, like he goes and puts up this dome, and so you can see it. Like the person with the mask on can see it 3D. But if you're just dancing in the dome, you see it dripping down the dome around you. And it's coming when we just get decent AR. We're freaking contact lenses. We can all see
I just want to get the holograms off of the face. Like the Google Glass thing was a...
No, you know what? I remember when you got those glasses and you're like, oh.
It's great, but I want the technology to be in the building and not in the body.
That's what I'm saying. You know, Andrew Jones's dome, it's in the freaking dome.
Yeah.
But anyway, pop. I just gotta say this thing. If you freaking put when they just look like sunglasses, even when they just look like mirror shades, and you can't. Part of the problem with Google Glass is you see your eyeballs popping around.
Yeah.
Okay, but they just look like mirror shades, and I can see you, and I can also see your freaking dragon wings and the freaking fractals morphing around on your skin. And if you're on my, server, yeah, I can see them, baby. But like, if you're on my server, you can see the X-wing battle in the sky every 15 minutes, right? But more importantly, there's cameras on the side of them, and I can see out of your eyes.
Right.
When I can see out of your eyes, whoever gets on top of being the YouTube or Netflix or, not Netflix, but Instagram or whatever of that, the changer, we're like, oh, my friend's up closer to the stage. I'm going to look through their eyes. Oh, my friend's at this bombing in Afghanistan, or somebody just keeps an open server. Like I said, this is the step towards the self-similarity of your cosmic periscope, right? How many fans do you have looking out of your eyes all the time? And what's wrong with them that they're not living their own lives?
The issue of vicarity.
But whatever, pop up. So I'm finishing with this essay about ayahuasca, and I was up freaking every other day, like 6 hours upriver from the Akitosphere. I had a problem I don't believe in. I was like to die. And so I've been trying to write about my experience with ayahuasca, and I found out from Earth, who one of the people who runs Erowid. I said, "Do you think I have 1 million hits put together?" He said, "Oh, they all have 1 million hits." And I'm like, "They each have 1 million hits?" It's like, yeah, it's mostly been the only column on Erowid for, we get 100,000 unique visitors a day. And they don't pay me, so I didn't know, right? And I was like, oh, shit. And suddenly...
Should have been selling ads.
but suddenly the responsibility, it's like the Terrence McKenna problem. Like, some people are going to take you literally. There's a bunch of 19-year-old kids. If I say entities, they're going to believe entities. If I say little darts, they're going to believe little darts. And the responsibility got really heavy on me, and it's taken me years to put this out. But when I finish the editing of this essay, then I get to put out a book of all of my Erowid essays. And they're going to put it on their freaking splash page. I'll be at least, not Rich Solvent, right? And the fact that I could have been this entire time, but it was so important for me because I'm so precise with language. My writing is very different than I talk, people. Like, it takes me hours to write a paragraph, and it's very intricate.
It's true. I can attest to this. We'll link to your writing in the show notes. Your stuff is so methodical and articulate, and actually, that's a big piece of why we had to record this episode twice.
Right. Well, yeah, right. But like I said, I write differently than I talk. But so that book is going to come out of my tea time essays, and that's the thing that's going to be soon, and. I also was very worried about how my fans, who are all psychedelic, but like self-experimentalists, are going to react to this. And you know how you say, well, if I could just help one person, if I'm going to give one person horrible trips, it upsets me. Right? And I know that what I have to say in this thing is going to be upsetting to a lot of people. It's, I'm all for recreational DMT or whatever. But my experience of it was, I didn't know maybe what I'd been getting into, right? Don't take candy from strangers. Observe the candy. Observe the stranger. Do I want this thing, right? Imagine you were some entity that just, you put all these spores out in the noosphere or something, and like somebody gets this thing, and what they occurs to them as everything they've ever wanted. Just the thing itself, like, oh, it's everything, right? You click on it. And like the Rift or whatever, you look at it and you clicked on it. You click on it, it starts downloading right away. What is it? Click on me, pick this one, not this one, that one, click on this, right? And entities are like that. They're tricksy as fuck. And you clicked on it, it starts downloading. What do they want? And ayahuasca's like, I'm scanning you for patches, cookies, updates, viruses, and we have found some malware that... Like a dragon mama, don't you realize you're using an insentient browser that doesn't give a shit about you? And it's not that DMT is evil. It's like I said, it's like you're using bad porn pop-up Windows 99.
Well, it's like we were talking about.
It's not protecting you.
It wasn't it wasn't malicious.
Right.
It was
No,
just
exactly.
people
Well,
set up an ad revenue model trying to make it free.
Right. And it doesn't. But the sites you're visiting are leaving cookies all over your shit. And some of them were malware, some of them were upgrades. Most of them, like, what is it? And the question doesn't read, what is it? And it's like, it's just got a cookie on your system. And I'm like, what's it doing? As if it's about me. And it's like, no, it's not about you. It's like it's mining its fucking crypto on you. Like, it's just using your idle cycles, like SETI at home. It got a cookie on your system. You're a time binder. You're actually processing data. You can't do it if you're outside of time. You need a machine to freaking process it on. We are one. We're holding an avatar in 3 space. We've got property. And it wants to make a deal with you that, all I did was click on it, didn't make a deal. Now it's got like a freaking cookie on your system. And it's just using your idle cycles. And when you get those things defragged, after a big psychedelic ayahuasca, you feel like, oh, I have so much of my processor back. Why? Because you defragged a bunch of those freaking cookies. And ayahuasca even is not aligned, people. Like, oh, it's good, it wants to heal you, it's grandma. It will help you fucking throw darts at your enemies just as much. If it's like, oh, it has a bunch of different faces that different types of people will make a deal with it. Sure, you can install yourself on my system, and you're going to give me the ability to see people's diseases, or, like I said, throw little darts at your enemies, or whatever it is. And so, hey, if I had cancer or something, I would go back and do it again. Like, I'm not dealing with it. But I stopped trusting, like I said, recreational DMT or whatever, because I'm just not superhero enough to necessarily know that my virus protection is working. So, anyway, those essays are coming out, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And eventually, yes, my science fiction book will come out, and your science fiction book will come out when you finish it. And let's race and see who.
Let's
race and see
essay
who can get it.
collections
Let's race and see who
followed
can get it out
by
first.
science fiction.
Yeah,
and
but I really want to read yours. Like, I'm not freaking blowing you in any way like that. We were amazed. I listened to it like 4 times. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And
Yeah,
I'm sure that if I had any of your fiction in audiobook format, I'd be listening the shit
Not
out
if
of it
I'm
also.
reading it. We need someone else to read it. Like, it's really, really good. We just need someone. No, I need to learn. I did better this time, I hope. I need to learn to speak more clearly. But at least I learned to write clearly.
And with that, I love you.
Brought
Thank
to you by placebo. If I want more, just take more. Placebo works like crazy. And now extra thanks placebo. Placebo because you know it works. Placebo.
Genuine placebo.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for listening, folks. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Future Fossils is part of the MindPod network, an absolutely excellent collection of shows. I suggest you go to MindPod Network and check them all out and subscribe to them all. Thanks again to all of you for sharing this show with your friends, for reviewing it wherever you listen. These are small deeds that add up in a big way, and they really help grow important conversations around important topics. So thanks again. I'll see you next week.